Ani, hello everyone. We're gonna get started again, but please feel free to keep munching away. I want to start first and foremost to say chimigwich to council members, to community members, and to visitors today for welcoming us here in WIKWEMKOONG and for joining us here today. It's an honor and a pleasure to be part of this awesome event. So I want to start off saying Ani, Ezongere Kwe, Ezongere Katupkwa Kwe, Indigenous Cause, WIKWEMKOONG Donjaba, and Anishinaabe Kwe, and Dao Miigwech. Hello, everyone. My name is Jessie Popp. I am an off-reserve member of WIKWEMKOONG, and I'm a faculty member at the University of Guelph. I am sort of the lead of the WISE Lab, or the Wildlife Indigenous Science Ecology Lab, and we have quite a few team members here with us today that you'll probably meet throughout the day. You've heard a little bit about them in some of the presentations, and they're actually downstairs with some booths if you want to check those out later. So I just kind of wanted to share a little bit today the story about how the WISE Lab came to be, how I got into doing this work, and connecting with Theodore and the WIKWEMKOONG Lands Department to do such cool projects. So as an Anishinaabe student with mixed Indigenous and European heritage, growing up, I sort of had a foot in two worlds. Sometimes seeing things through an Indigenous lens, sometimes through a Eurocentric or Western lens. But two worlds was not what I was exposed to in school, in the public education system. And this is not something I really realized at first. But through my academic journey, I came to learn more and more on my own about how the ways of thinking, the dominant ways of thinking had established the very education systems I was part of. So for example, it was John A. Macdonald, Canada's first Prime Minister, who said, the great aim of our legislation has been to do away with the tribal system, assimilate Indigenous people in all respects with other inhabitants of Dominion as speedily as they are fit to change. And it was that way of thinking that created the learning environment that I was part of. And of course, we know the many horrors and tragedies and injustices that resulted from that way of thinking. And we know that we need to change this. So I knew that I wanted to be part of that change I wanted to see in the world. And I wondered, how could I bring together my desire for change and for protecting the environment and all our relations for 7 generations? So I had a long journey in graduate school. I did a PhD actually focused on elk. And it's then that I had the awesome opportunity to connect with Theodore. So we met at a Sudbury Elk Restoration Committee meeting. I think it was about a decade ago now. And with the things that Theodore shared at the meetings, I was so inspired and hungry to learn more. Theodore was so hopeful, so open to sharing knowledge, so kind and so patient. So we became colleagues and we became friends. Theodore actually became the best teacher I have ever come to know. So then and still today, shaping the way I think, what I do, and the very meaning of my existence. So Theodore taught me that it's time to stand together. We've heard this a few times today. Ombe Mom Wisda. And, you know, sometimes being an environmental professional, you get a little depressed, or anyone can really, looking at climate change and the impacts happening to SHKAKAMIK KWE. But, you know, having Theodore as a friend, someone who always kept me going, always kept me hopeful. And always teaching that all our relations need all humans to work together to repair the damage that has been done to SHKAKAMIK KWE. So the teachings that Theodore has shared and other elders have shared are very similar. Robin Wall Kimmerer, who wrote the book Braiding Sweetgrass, talks about teachings from our relations and those from Nanabojo representing all our relations. So for example, Robin Wall Kimmerer, an Indigenous scholar, writes that being a relative is more than shared blood from a common past. Real kinship arises when we realize that we have a common future, that our fates are linked. What happens to us happens to you, right? We are all connected. She also shares a story about Nana Bojo and how Nana Bojo turned to the humans to make a final plea. We're asking you to come home. We need you to be good relatives once again. Come down off your pyramid, this pyramid that we've created, and back into the circle, into a circle where we are all connected, where not one being is more important than another. A circle perhaps all humans used to belong to, but some have left, and a circle where we all stand together. So, taking these teachings through my life, I wondered, how can we do this? How can we work together in ways, in good ways, ways that equally value and respect Indigenous and Western ways of knowing? So, I started learning on my own. I wasn't taught this in school. I started learning on my own about frameworks for braiding or weaving knowledge systems, things like two-eyed seeing or following the path of the two-row wampum. And just to give an example of one of those, two-eyed seeing, or Adwubtamunk, which is Mi'kmaq for two-eyed seeing, is a concept coined by Mi'kmaq elder Albert Marshall. And he shares that you can better understand the world, the environment, for the benefit of all by seeing through multiple lenses. So for example, one with the seeing through one lens or eye through the strengths of Indigenous knowledge and perspectives, and another through the strengths of Western knowledge and perspectives. And then seeing through both of these lenses together, you get a bigger picture of the way things are happening, a more holistic picture, a bigger picture of understanding, for example, the environment for the benefit of everyone. So the WISE Lab started to form shortly after I finished my time as a student. And we used many Indigenous frameworks to guide our work and the development of the WISE Lab, of course, with lots of influence from Theodore and other folks, other elders that we worked with. Today, one of the core sets of values that are part of our research are the 5 R's of Indigenous research. So these being responsibility, respect, relevance, and reciprocity, and relationships being at the core of everything. So we work together to co-create a research process grounded in the 5 R's. So projects being relevant to research questions and outcomes, to Indigenous priorities, to community priorities, being respectful of Indigenous peoples, knowledge systems, and cultural integrity, always embracing reciprocity, so a give and take among each other, but also between humans and the land, being responsible to work together and care for the land for future generations. That's our responsibility. Our responsibility is as caretakers and thinking about our future generations, 7 generations. And relationships being the core of everything among people, among the land, and systems of the spiritual and natural world. You've probably seen some of the WISE Lab students and young lab students out and about in the community. So relationship building, very important. They're engaging in different activities. We heard this before me. We heard about classroom visits, and so really prioritizing these values. And so, these are values that are, shared by Indigenous scholars, but we also listen to communities. So Dr. Ali Menzies, who was part of the WISE Lab, she's now a professor at the University of Calgary. She actually worked to have discussions with First Nations across the lands, also known as Canada, including the SHKAKAMIK KWE, the Species at Risk Working Group, and ask questions to folks to say, well, if we want to work on research in a good way, because research has had a bad name in the past, it's very extractive, harmful in the past. So how do we move forward in a good way? How do we do things respectfully? What are some of the values that are important to you? So she represented what folks shared with her in this dream catcher, and showed that creation and natural law is at the very core, with values like reciprocity, gratitude, humility, agency, responsibility, and so on being very important, and relationships, again, being the thread that binds everything together. Folks shared things with us about community priorities, like important things are to seek guidance from elders, prioritize youth involvement, foster connections with the land, create opportunities for knowledge transfer using language, and so on. So ensuring the projects that we do in the WISE Lab are led by the communities that we work with, prioritize Indigenous values like these, are the foundations for what we do. And through these approaches, we work to advance the natural sciences in the spirit of truth, true reconciliation for the sake of all our relations. So, Theodore mentioned a couple of the projects we have going on, and I'll touch very lightly on them because the students are here today if you want to learn more, and they can chat with you downstairs. Um, but the WIKWEMKOONG Lands Department, Species at Risk Group, WISE Lab, Young Lab, First Nations, even provincial government have developed many projects over the years in partnership together with these core values. And you may have heard of our Apakwinajin or BAT project, our Manidosh or insect project, as you could have seen students around, especially this summer. So these projects were developed based on community interest with guidance from the Species at Risk Working Group. So, for example, the BAT project, and I'll let Michelle talk a little bit more about that because she's working on that project. You could talk to her downstairs. But the BAT project is about trying to identify species at risk that come through WIKWEMKOONG, trying to look at their habitats, but also trying to connect youth to bats as one of our relations. These Apakwinajin and Manidosh are two groups of species that, some people might not just want to go cuddle and hug, but they are very important species. They all are, right? We're all connected. All our relations are important. So trying to reconnect, reestablish, and ignite those relationships. And now I heard that the students want a bug lab. So that's really cool to learn. So these projects, all of these projects, ensure to work that they're community led, bring together knowledge systems, uplift language and values, and inspires our youth to connect with the land in all our relations. So bringing folks back to the circle. So here's Michelle Beltran. So she's working on the BAT project. She's co-advised by Dr. Ali Menzies. Is Michelle in here? Oh, they're at the back there. So that's Michelle. If anyone wants to talk to Michelle and learn more about the BAT project, if you haven't already chatted with her. Natasha Hurt is co-advised by Dr. Andrew Young, and Natasha's right there. So Natasha's working on the insect project, so the insect project is looking into insect pollinators and the interconnection there between plants and insects. So these, like all the projects we're working on, again, take direction from community, take direction from the Species at Risk Working Group. So here's just an example. Michelle is actually giving a little presentation to the working group that Brenda was talking about this morning. So sharing ideas, brainstorming together, and co-determining the direction of the project, what we should do, what we should include, and how we should present some of the outcomes. There have been some really awesome meetings. And so I'm talking a lot about research, but we go far beyond research. Our entire team has had so much fun helping to connect youth to the land. So from smaller classroom visits here in WIKWEMKOONG, and you can see the WISE Lab team with the little cutie patooties there in their vests. So these smaller visits to these really large species at risk youth camps, for example. We have been part of youth camps just within the community, but this year, as Theodore mentioned, we were actually hosting multiple First Nations. So really fun stuff, engaging with other communities, sharing widely the successes happening here in WIKWEMKOONG. And our work together has been very far reaching. We have locally impacted local impacts, but also global impacts. So we are actually part of this ARAMAT project, a project that represents more than 100 Indigenous government organizations across the globe, 35 universities, 8 federal, territorial, provincial governments, and more. So it's been really awesome to get connected and to share this really amazing stuff that we're doing and inspire others. So talking about collaborating with others, another project that we have going on that Theodore mentioned this morning is the WAAT SAA MAA JIG project. So those that walk with wolves. And you can see this beautiful logo. And there's actually t-shirts up here, and this was created by WIKWEMKOONG's George Peltier. So this project was actually developed a couple years ago now, and it's still continuing on like the other projects, where Theodore, the working group, Magnenawan First Nation, and Shawanaga First Nation were really wanting to learn more about wolves in the traditional territory, with eastern wolves being a species at risk. So wanting to learn more about them, not only as their spatial ecology, where they're moving, what some travel corridors to protect them, but also to emphasize that they are our brothers and our sisters, and to ensure that we can share that with community, with youth. So again, being community led, taking lead from the leadership circle, um, we decided the best way to answer the questions that were important to communities was to collar wolves so we could track them, because they have very huge they have very huge territories. So we put GPS collars on to understand them. But also, we emphasize that we want to include ceremony, our communities, and our utmost respect for our Mayan kin. And speaking of ceremony, I think it was 2 days ago, there was a wolf ceremony at the marsh. Maybe some of you were able to attend. So Christopher Lim, who's back there, he's the master's student working on this project right now, and he's co-advised by Dr. Joe Northrup, who's here, who's back in the corner over there. So this is a partnership with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. It's an incredible project. And we are still moving along, but doing awesome things. So I mentioned that we like the communities wanted to learn more about the movements of wolves, and we decided that putting GPS collars on would be the best way to do that. But to put a GPS collar on, you have to first find the wolves, right? And it can be hard because they have such a huge territory. So sometimes you got to use helicopter and go out and look, and that takes a lot of time, a lot of hours, a lot of money. So with the leadership circle, we said, well, why don't we just talk to those who know wolves best? Why don't we talk to our community members? They're on the land, they know where the wolves are. So here's a picture of Theodore with Jerry Burke from Point Grandin's Mill Lake. And he's giving him a beautiful piece of art here, gifting him a piece of art for helping us determine where the wolves are. But we asked him, he said, I know exactly where the wolves are. This is where they're going to be. This is this time of year. They'll be coming through here. Come check this area. And sure enough, Theodore came up in the helicopter, as did others from the other communities, bringing that knowledge that was shared with him and them from community members, and actually directing the flights, saying, telling the pilot, well, our community member said this is where we'll see wolves. Let's go over there. And sure enough, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little wolf there through the window behind Theodore. So we found the wolves, just like community members shared with us. So a way to bring together knowledge systems to make science better. So this is an example of some of the information that we're getting from the GPS collars. It's you have Point Grandin there and WIKWEMKOOng. So each of these different colors is a different wolf, and just a bunch of of locations. So the locations would send a beacon every 4 hours, I think. Hey, Chris? It's every 4 hours. So you get a whole bunch of locations, so you can start to see their movements, their territories, where they are, and this differs at different times of year. You can see seasonal movements, you can see important travel corridors. So these are all important things for helping us understand our Mayan kin and thinking about if we need to protect them, if there is important travel corridors, maybe we can protect those too. So really awesome stuff, and results still coming, and Chris will be around this afternoon to talk about that. So this work, this specific project too, is having an impact in WIKWEMKOOng, but also beyond. The Canadian Museum of Nature in Ottawa heard about what we were doing and wanted to feature our project for a year in the museum in a special exhibit, which was really cool. So that was featured, and it was highlighted as an example of bringing together knowledge systems for the caretaking of our relations. So the museum invited us, our partners, and youth from communities to go visit the grand opening of the exhibit, which here we are here, and you could see they got to see pictures of their people they knew sitting in a museum. So it was a lot of fun. So this is a quote that Theodore often shares, and I think it's on the poster for this event. So our elders say, "We are only children on SHKAKAMIK KWE WAAT. We do not own anything that she offers, therefore we must live in harmony with her and respect all things on her. We must live in harmony, we must come back to the circle, and we must work together to get there again." So that is what we are working toward doing in partnership with incredible people and with Theodore leading the way. The WISE Lab will forever be grateful for the partnerships, with the WIKWEMKOONG Lands Department, the Species at Risk Working Group, and all the wonderful partners and people we have met along the way. So with that, I'd like to say Chimigwich for listening, and I can answer any questions if anybody has any. Oh, stop. Yeah. So that's a good question. So in the front was asked for the GPS collars, are we just tracking males or just females? We're actually tracking both. So it's can be sometimes very difficult to find the wolves. So we just take advantage of whoever we spot and try to get, at least 2 wolves from a pack, so that we can start understanding the pack. We don't have to get them all because they kind of move together, but that's a great question. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Great question. Yeah, something I forgot to mention. So we are looking at wolves in general, but eastern wolves are the species at risk. We also have gray wolves, we have coyote, and we have a hybridization of all of them. And that's part of why this eastern wolf is a species at risk. The only way that we know of so far to tell an eastern wolf apart from a hybrid, for example, is through genetics. So yes, we were doing genetics. So when we would capture the wolves, just to put the collars on, we would do it very quickly to try to minimize any impacts to the wolf, but we would also take a sample to test genetically, and we would check out so scat deposits you can actually get genetics from. So we're going out in the field looking for wolf scat, and yes, we do have eastern wolves in the area. We do have a mix. We do have gray wolves. So it's kind of this. They call it a canis soup. But yeah, we definitely do have eastern wolves. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Yeah, great question. So we were asked if we would be providing reports to the community when the project is done. So as part of like the foundations for doing good work in a good way, we try our best to make sure that we are sharing the outcomes and the progress of the project, all the projects we do throughout the entire project. So that's why Chris is here and he's downstairs. There's a poster down there. So we have information. So we're always attending events. We're attending powwow, the youth camp. We're doing as many different things as at least the working group is trying to help guide us to do to share information. And Chris has given a specific wolf presentation that I think was open to the community. Yeah. But also reports. So we understand that, some people like to read, some people want to just sit and watch. So we're trying to do a variety of different things to help share knowledge. There's maps at the lands office right now. And yes, so definitely when we have more results that we can share, we'll definitely create reports in addition to presentations and everything like that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Menzies. Yeah. 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 Oh, yeah, definitely. Definitely. There's a paper that we can send to you too. Yep. Any other questions? And I will is there a little hand up back there or is that for the teacher? Okay. Okay, so I'll be around for the rest of the day, so please come find me if you have any other questions. And for now, I will pass it on to the next person who is Andrew Young, Dr. Andrew Young. Oh, there you go.
Thanks, Jesse. Morning, folks. My name's Andrew Young. I know I have the last time slot before lunch, so I'll try and keep this relatively brief because the food looks great and I'm sure everyone's hungry. But I'm here to talk a little bit about insect research in WIKWEMKOONG, both youth outreach portions and also some of the wild pollinator research we've been doing. So yeah, my name's Andrew. I grew up in Toronto. I really love insects. I started early. I really haven't changed since I was a little kid, except I got slightly taller. I am Chinese Canadian. I'm a settler. I've lived in Guelph, Ontario since 2020 with my spouse and our pets. I have 4 nieces, 2 on each side of the family. I don't have any kids, but this is my pet turtle. His name's Sam. Sam is actually kind of how I ended up meeting Theodore. So back in 2022, I think, Theodore was giving a talk at the University of Guelph Arboretum. I happened to also be giving a talk that day. And he brought sweetgrass turtles. Like, sweetgrass turtles have been made in the community as gifts for people, for the speakers. And I went up to him afterwards and I told him, like, hey, we've never met. And you couldn't have known this, but my turtle, who's my pet, who I've had since I was a little kid, he's like a son to me. He was trapped in the States for the past 2 years because of COVID. I couldn't go down and get him because I used to live down there. But I had just gotten Sam back the day before Theodore gave his talk. So when he gave me that sweetgrass turtle, I went up to him and just said, like, this means a lot. It feels really serendipitous. And so Theodore invited me out to dinner that day and we got to chatting. And, during dinner, he said, like, oh, if you're interested in insects, I run this youth outreach camp. Maybe you could come up sometime, talk to the kids about bugs, like what you do. And I said, sure, that sounds like a lot of fun. And so that was the first summer I was up here 3 years ago with Jesse. And so Jesse was talking about large mammals. I was talking about insects, the kids at this youth camp. It was a lot of fun. The kids seemed into it. And then I've kind of been coming back pretty regularly ever since to help with youth outreach. So yeah, first of all, I do want to, I should say, to council members, elders, community members, fellow visitors, thanks so much for having me here. It really means a lot that, I've been so welcomed and the whole lab has been felt very welcome here. So we all really appreciate it. As far as the actual insects that I tend to do my research on, I work on a group called flower flies. They're native pollinators. They look a lot like bees and wasps, but they're not actually. They are totally harmless. They cannot sting at all. They can't bite, but they are still pollinators. So we find them to be like a really nice group of insects to use as outreach, right? Because people are initially scared of them, but then when you start talking, people usually come around on them. Here's just a couple other examples. You can see that, again, they look a lot like a bee or a wasp in general, but they have short little antennae. And again, they're looking like this so that birds leave them alone, right? Most things see this, they go, oh, shoot, that's a wasp. We're not going to touch it. And it works really well for them because then they don't get eaten. And here's another couple examples. We've got one of my flies here on the left and then a bumblebee on the right. You can see they look very similar. People can be, forgiven for mistaking those two. Same thing here. There's the fly on the left. It looks an awful lot like one of these big bald-faced hornets. And you really wouldn't want to mess with this thing because it looks like it could sting. But they are pollinators. They can't hurt you, so they're great for that. And then as a little added bonus, this is what baby flower flies look like. So this is one of their larvae. You could also think of this as a maggot because it is a baby fly, but they eat aphids. So they're out there in our gardens helping to, control things that might otherwise eat all our vegetable crops and things like that. But I don't just do this by myself these days. I have a whole lab with me. And so just a few of the team members I have here today. So Natasha Hurt is working on a master's project. Jessie talked about her project a little bit already, but she's down at Prairie Point on the Alvar, looking at the pollinators and the plants there, and also creating some identification resources for Indigenous communities. And she's been up in Wiki quite a bit, visiting classrooms and things like that, as Cassandra and Jacinda already mentioned. I also have Alice Dabrowski here today. She's doing a PhD working on flower fly larvae, the little aphid eaters, and a lot of their contributions to the environment, and is also developing a lot of insect identification resources. And in the future is going to be helping to develop toolkits so that different communities, like Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities, can set up their own insect outreach programs. And then finally, Catherine Norman is an undergrad tech who's been working with me for the past 2 summers. They've been coming up to Wiki for 2 summers as well, and has just been contributing a lot to the insect outreach here. And will be officially joining the lab later this year, and is hoping to continue working in Wiki in the long term with me. And then finally, Jeremy Tessier, who is actually at Fleming College. He's an insect teacher as well. He focuses on forest insects and disease, and he's a lab volunteer who's helping with Natasha's project. So again, there's lots of various research type things I'm doing, but the main thing I wanted to focus on today was some of the youth outreach we've been doing in Wiki. A lot of which has been out on the land at the Alvar and in the marsh. So just some of the groups that we've kind of been working with there was a life skills camp that came out in 2024. This is what a lot of the insect outreach actually looks like, right? Like we can give all the kids nets, they chase bugs around, we help them ID them, we try and convince them not to catch all the bees so they don't get stung. And you can see the girl on the left here, she's got something in her net right now. This guy seems to have caught himself with the net. I don't know how these kids all look so much cooler than me, but there it is. The thing that's really nice about using insects for outreach with kids is during the summer, insects are everywhere, right? You don't have to try too hard to find them. There's many different things to look at. There's all sorts of things. Like most kids are gonna find something they're interested in. So I always like to kind of spin it as like it's real life Pokemon. Everyone has that on their phone, but if you can get kids catching the real things too, then that's even better. I grew up playing Pokemon, so it's not too hard for me. We've also been helping with the youth camp for the past 3 years. So again, this was how I ended up here in the first place. Was Theodore kind of invited me to help with the 2022 one. Then in 2023, we had more of the lab here. A lot of these outreach, the boxes you can see on the right there with the pin specimens, those are actually downstairs right now. So you can check that out after this talk if you'd like. In 2024, this was the biggest camp yet. So this was the 2-day one that was overnight. This was a big part of Michelle's work actually on her bat project, but we also kind of piggybacked and got a lot of insect outreach in as well. So thanks, Michelle. We did sneak a lot of insect content in there. And there's Natasha teaching 2 of the youth how to use her camera. We got some fun photos out of that. And then here's just the lab kind of hanging out with Theodore in the shade for a few minutes because it was a bit of a heat wave during that. And so we were all sweating to death. There's a lot of other outreach events that we try and frequent as much as possible as well, though. So there's the Community Open House Day in 2023 with some of the lab members and other people that are associated with the lab, as well as the Wiki Powwow. That was also 2023. We've been there this year as well. It's just I always forget to take pictures, so I had to kind of scramble to see what I could find. I'm not going to dwell on this too much because Cassandra and Jacinta and Jesse already talked about this, but we do try and do as much school outreach as possible, both in elementary schools and the high school. In this case, I believe it was the kindergartens that actually came to the lands office. And so there's Alice talking about her project with them. And then here's Natasha in the same hot seat talking about, I think this was actually some of her previous work she'd done before joining the lab. Yeah, and then tomorrow we actually do have, I believe Natasha and Chris are going out to some of Cassandra and Brenda's classes to continue talking to the kids about the stuff they've done. So, if you're in one of those classes, you can look forward to more bug content tomorrow, hopefully. And again, some of the kids seem to be really into it. We got some of these drawings that are up in the lab now. They're very cute, so I just wanted to include a few of those. If your drawing is here, then, thank you. And if you did do a drawing that isn't up here, I only had time to snap 4 pictures, so it's nothing personal. But thank you to everyone. They all mean a lot to us. As far as some of the actual pollinator work we're doing, so this is a picture I took at Prairie Point. I just had to use this picture because this is a blazing star. So this is one of my favorite flowers there. And then you can actually see, here's one of my little flower flies on the plant there. So I had to snap that photo. So Natasha is using a combination of different collecting methods to catch and identify some of the pollinators. And we're trying to kind of associate them with some of the native plants that are on the Alvar. Because the Alvar it's a really special habitat. There aren't a lot of Alvars in Canada, and there's a lot of wildflowers that grow there and not too many other places. So we're trying to make an association between some of the native pollinating insects that live there and some of the plants that live there. And so you can see there's Natasha and Jeremy out in the field, and then Theodore and Alice and myself all helping out. And down here, these are the pan traps we use to collect the insects. So they're spray painted bowls. They look like big fake flowers to the insect, and then we put a bit of water in the bottom. And so some insects fly in and then we can catch them that way, but it captures a very limited amount of them. So we're only taking as many as we need. And then, here are some of the various beautiful wildflowers that are out there. I just have fun with my camera sometimes while the students are doing all the hard work and collecting. But yeah, so getting a better understanding of what insects are out there pollinating some of these species will hopefully allow us to preserve the plants better in the future. Not all of the plants we see on the Alvar are ones that we're happy to see, unfortunately. So this was sweet clover. When we were out there this summer, Nicole pointed out that one area of the Alvar kind of hasn't been the same ever since it was disturbed quite heavily a few years ago. And we did notice this plant called sweet clover growing there. Turns out it's non-native. It's used to stabilize soil a lot after development. So after roads are cut and things like that, sometimes seed mixes are sprinkled. And those are usually seeds of plants that grow very quickly, and they can help bind the soil together to limit erosion. But sometimes they're using non-native plants like this. And unfortunately, sweet clover, it can dominate habitats, especially like alvars, where there's lots of sun and not too much competition. And they can actually spread chemicals through the roots that poisons the ground for everything other than other sweet clovers. So they can kind of take over a whole area, and we don't want that to happen. So this was something we kind of realized halfway through Natasha's fieldwork, and we had to pivot her methods a little bit to make sure we weren't spreading the seeds around at all. Especially after Nicole pointed out, like, hey, please don't make this place worse through your work. So we're actually going to be trying to help the lands department to organize some sweet clover pulls next summer so that we can at least manage this plant. We might not be able to remove it completely, but we'd like to stop it from spreading any further than it already has. But even things like that, like a sweet clover pull, that's another opportunity to engage with community. We've talked to Nancy. She used to organize these. So we're going to try and get as many members from the community together as interested, maybe some of the school groups, and just, try and stay on top of this plant and make sure that it doesn't spread through some of the areas that have a lot of other rare species growing and medicines and things like that. This isn't really part of anyone's project in particular, but Natasha and Alice and soon to be Catherine and I have all sort of been helping with this. But we're also trying to build a species list in the long term. Right, so Theodore has mentioned that he has a list of plants that live out in Wiki now, and some bird surveyors came and helped generate a list of birds that live in the marsh. And so he's asked if we can generate a list of native insects that live there in the long term. So this is actually an insect trap. It's a passive trapping method. It looks a lot like a little tent, but insects get caught in it and they fly into a collection bottle, and then we can go check the bottle every couple of weeks, bring the samples back to Guelph, and slowly work through those and ID them in the winter when we're not outside all of the time. So hopefully within the next few years, we'll be generating a fairly large species list of insects for Theodore. We have started though, so I just want to show off again. I really like these flower flies. These are my babies, aside from my pet turtle. But this is 6 of the native species of flower flies that we have found in Wiki so far. So there's a couple of these, we call them calligraphers in the top left and right, and then a big drone fly in the center and a few other groups. This one up here is called a sedge sitter. I spent several years of my life researching just them. I really love them. There's a million species and they're hard to tell apart. But they do really like sedges, so that you find them in watery areas very often. So it was just nice to see some of those at the marsh too. And pictures like that, I find that the live pictures really help bring these to life for folks. As far as future work that we want to do, working with the lands department, working with Theodore, working with Wiki. One of the big ones is emerald ash borer monitoring. So Theodore and I were talking about this a little bit over the summer. Unfortunately, emerald ash borer is another one of these non-native species. It is this very pretty little beetle that originated from northern China. It has made it into North America, and it's pretty devastating for ash tree populations. And in Manitoulin and in Wiki in particular, there's still a pretty healthy population of black ash, which is a species at risk plant. So a big thing that we're hoping to do in the future is to start setting up different traps to sort of monitor for these emerald ash borers, because it hasn't made it into Wiki yet, but they are on the island. So we are worried that they're going to spread here. This is probably going to be a bit of a sad project in some senses, in that it will be likely impossible to fully stop the spread of emerald ash borers. But if we can at least sort of help slow the spread of them through public awareness campaigns and talking to people about not moving firewood around, things like that, there's a good chance that we can stop them from spreading through Wiki so fast that we can't at least preserve some of the ash trees, right? So through monitoring, we can at least detect the presence of these, and this will give time to harvest some trees for cultural purposes, protect individual large trees if there are some in particular that we're trying to keep alive, that sort of thing. And then here's from last summer. This was some of the ash trees Theodore was aware of that were near Wiki but not in it, that had been showing damage. So you can see crown dieback on this tree on the right, and on the bark on the left here, we can see lots of insect damage underneath the bark. And then there's he and I just kind of taking a look at this. It looks like this isn't the emerald ash borer as far as we can tell. We think this was native beetles that are doing this, so they're probably not going to wipe out all of the ash trees in a big hurry. These might have been trees that were already kind of stressed, and so they were more susceptible to some of the beetles that are already present in Ontario, and not as much of a problem. but it's something where we do want to set up a monitoring program and try and use a couple different trap types to at least figure out where in Manitoulin emerald ash borer is already present and where they're not, and so where the highest threat risks are of moving firewood from in terms of spreading this species around. And finally, I do want to say that this has been very much like a reciprocal arrangement. All of us have been learning a lot from the community, and we're really grateful that community members have been willing to share their teachings. We do feel very lucky to have been invited here by Theodore and be able to work with the community and welcome to classrooms and things like that. And so here's Noreen, John's mom, teaching us how to harvest sweetgrass and sharing a few sweetgrass teachings with us. And so that was really special last summer. So yeah, thanks again. Chimigwech. If you have any questions or comments, I'd be happy to field them. Other than that, have a great lunch. All right, and actually, we do have one more thing before you go.
Yeah, sorry. We know folks might be hungry, even though we had just such a wonderful, wonderful break full of food. But before lunch, we wanted to take just a moment to share something perhaps a little unexpected. This work that we've been celebrating and sharing here today with you all, we know would not be possible without the support from Chief and Council, without so many incredible partners, the Species at Risk Working Group, the community, and beyond. But there has been one person who has taken on the leadership role of it all, who has been dubbed today Jean-Luc Picard, and who is the glue holding everything together, who has guided us all, leading us much like a good Mayingan leader would. Someone incredibly courageous, respectful, wise, humble, truthful, honest, and so full of love. Theodore, you have led us to a place of belonging, a place of hope and joy, and a place we are all so very grateful to be part of. You have touched so many people with your kindness and your transformative teachings. You have planted so many seeds that we just know will continue to change the world for many generations to come. We invite you, Theodore, to come up, as we would like to honor you and to offer you some small tokens of our appreciation and our love.
All right, I go back to the casino tonight. I needed these yesterday. Claude, you can't have this. Wow.